Hi, and welcome to Eonan's Edge. Today I'm going to be doing a general overview of my full-size everyday carry collection. This is not all the knives in my collection, but it is kind of a cross-section of some of the knives that I own. For full-size, there are 5 brands represented here. There are also a few different blade styles, which should keep things interesting. We're going to cover construction, materials, deployment, and ergonomics like we did in the last video. We're going to go through and talk about cost, some other features on these knives as we go. So we'll start out over here. This is the Spyderco Tenacious. This is sort of the entry-level knife in their line. All the Spydercos kind of have a similar design to them. This is a non-assisted knife. It's a liner lock. It has great lockup, as you can see. It uses the 8CR13 MOV blade. Spyderco has this pretty much known for their thumb hole cutout on the blade. The combination blade here, we've got the serrated and the fine edge. We've got jimping back here. Obviously, the most common knife blade position, which is saber, has a great purchase for your hands. This was a promotional knife. It comes with the Desert Tan handles instead of a G10. The texturing on this is a little aggressive. I haven't put this in my pocket that many times, mostly because this is so aggressive that it tends to catch on the fabric on the inside of your pants. It's really, really sharp and really grabs onto your hand. Again, a true flat grind knife, as you can see, ground all the way from top to bottom. Pretty versatile with the serrations. I would have liked to maybe taken one of these serrations out, maybe left 3, giving you a little bit more of the flat cutting edge of the knife to use. But overall, this is a good budget price knife. It does allow you to put the pocket clip in 4 different positions. You can go tip up, tip down, left side and right side. As you can see, there are 4 sets of holes here. So again, Spyderco Tenacious, good looking knife, fits well in your hand. You get a good full purchase on this knife. There's plenty of blade, plenty of grip sticking out the bottom, and you can obviously get a nice firm grip in the main cutting position that you use this knife for. Spyderco Tenacious. The next knife that I'm going to review is a CRKT Shenanigan. This is a non-assisted knife. It's a flipper-only style knife. There we go, CRKT, OS 8 steel. This one happens to be a first production Ken Onion designed knife. Now, I'll tell you what I love about this knife. I love the blade length, the amount of cutting surface there is in it. Here's my hand. That's a pretty good sized blade for a folder without having an unusually, ridiculously large handle. So it uses OS 8 steel, which is a Japanese mid-grade type of steel, has good edge retention, cuts very well, not super hard to sharpen, pretty tough steel. It does have a pretty nice wide section back here to put your thumb if you're using it in modified or Filipino grip. Obviously, that's also really nice if you're using precision. But I'll tell you what I don't like about this knife. There's a couple of things. So it uses a composite scales as the frame. And as a result of that, the knife has a fair amount of play in it. If you adjust the pivot screw so that you take out the play, the knife doesn't open and close easily at all. Right now, it has to be flicked pretty hard to open. So I don't really care for that. To be honest, I'm not a fan of that. The other thing is that the jimping on the back of this knife, if you look at it, it's square. So when you push really hard to flip this knife open, you end up running your hand right across this, and it is pretty abrasive. It's not a super comfortable knife to open. And then finally, the other thing is they only designed, it's hard to believe Ken Onion designed this knife, but he only put 1 belt clip position on this knife. It's not even left-right reversible. It is simply right side, tip down. And I'm just not a fan of that tip down carry position. Myself, I like tip up better. Again, why? Because if the knife is being carried like this and I take it out of my pocket in tip down carry position, then I have to flip it open and I have to move my hand back around this way. So I have to make 2 motions with the knife before I can get it into a workable position. Again, I'm just not a fan of taking the knife out of my pocket like this, turning it in my hand, flipping it open, and then trying to deploy the knife. That being said, you do get Aussate steel. It has the biggest cutting surface of all the knives in this review. It does cut and slice really nice. I've used the knife a good bit, but I just haven't gotten in the habit of carrying this knife very much at all because I don't like the fact that it's tipped down, and I don't like the fact that it's kind of difficult to deploy. It always tends to be a little tough to run your hand over this. So I think they could have designed this jimping a little differently on the back of the knife. That being said, though, it's still a quality knife. It has great handle design. It definitely fits in your hand really well. It's not a knife you're going to turn around and use in the opposite direction. No, you're not going to use it for, say, chest lever like this and feel very comfortable doing that because they did put some scalloping in here, which is pretty aggressive. But again, this is the CRKT Shenanigan Ken Onion design. We'll talk about this knife next. This is Sog Aegis. This knife is an assisted opening knife. It's a Tanto. It also uses Aussate steel, like the Shenanigan. It's a good, decent quality steel, holds its edge pretty well. So I would expect that this knife would probably have decent edge retention like the CRKT did. It's a mixed combo type of blade with serrations here, and then a flat cutting edge, and then obviously the Tanto flat grind here, compound on the front. I have to be honest, I could never get comfortable with this knife to carry it. One of the things that I've always not liked is how blade heavy this knife is. Because it uses composite handles in the back and there's no real steel anywhere toward the back of the knife except for the pocket clip, the knife feels really out of balance to me. The steel is good. There's plenty of jimping on the knife, both here where your fingers go and on the top in your hand positions. It does use a thumb stud to deploy, so I don't have an issue with that. But it closes kind of hard. It's not a knife that you can close with one hand. It does have a safety lock here, so that's one thing. If you're afraid of assisted knives opening in your pocket, you don't have to worry about that with this knife. You can just throw the little safety lock and the knife won't open, and then once you disengage the safety lock, the knife will open. So this is the Sog Aegis with the Tanto blade. I really thought I would like this knife a lot more than I did, and I tended to not be quite as impressed overall with the ergonomics of this knife and just the general feel, the way this knife feels in your hand. Like I said, it's very blade heavy, and that's not something that I think for myself is going to make me want to carry this knife very much. We're going to move on to the knife I've carried probably the most out of every knife in my collection. This is the Kershaw Knockout. This is a US-made Kershaw. You can see by the wear on the pocket clip here how much this knife has been in my pocket. I've carried this probably more than any other knife here other than maybe some knives I had when I was a little younger. This knife has probably seen more carry with me. You can see where some of the powder coating has worn off of this knife just from being in and out of my pocket so many times. But this knife has a speed-safe deployment. It uses Sandvik 14C28N Swedish steel. Really good stuff. It is definitely a modern steel. It's not a super steel, but I think it presents great value. I have used and abused this knife a lot. I have cut a lot with it. You can't even really tell the blade surface with this ceramic wash satin. It really just holds up well and keeps the scratches and stuff from really showing up. Out of all the use that this knife has seen, I can only remember sharpening this knife one time. And to me, that's pretty significant since it's not a super high-end steel, and I have used this knife a lot. I love the feel of this knife. I love the thickness of this knife. It's got the aluminum handles, which are also, the scales are also the frame. It uses a liner lock. You got probably about 30 to 40% lock up there. I'm sorry, I use a frame lock. About 30 to 40% lock up there. And this knife has just been worked to death. So I do plan on buying, they now make a deep carry pocket clip for this that comes all the way up to the back of the knife here. So it lets the knife set completely and fully in your pocket. I do plan on adding that onto this knife. I still carry this knife. It's a sentimental favorite. The only complaint I have about this knife, which is something I mentioned in one of my earlier videos, is that it can be deployed with one hand, and yet it has thumb studs. There's no need to have a thumb stud on a knife like this when it can be deployed quickly and easily with a flipper tab. The thumb stud just gets in the way. It's not a deal breaker, but it's the one thing I don't like about this knife, because as you can see, the thumb studs are just a little bit higher than the scale of the knife. And so when you put your hands in your pockets, you tend to rub, catch your skin on them, catch your fingernails on them, things like that, when you're reaching in there for your keys and other things. That's the only detraction I have from the Knockout. It has a really nice feel to it. It's ergonomical. It has a big grip. You can get a lot of purchase on this knife, even if you have big hands. So they still make this. This is a knife that I love and I highly recommend. We're going to move on and we're going to talk about the Kershaw Link. I'm going to be doing a head-to-head comparison video of the Link versus my next knife here that I'm about to review, so that you can get a little better feel for what you're purchasing with the two of these. This is the current version of the Link. It uses an olive green 6061 aluminum scales. It has speed safe with a 20 CV crucible metals blade. This is a super steel. This is one of the best steels out there for knives right now. It's got everything you could want. It's got toughness, edge retention, corrosion resistance. This knife goes in my pocket a lot when I'm hiking with my wife out in the desert. I love the blade profile of it. I love the feel. There's plenty of knife to get your hands on here and hammer grip, even if you have bigger hands. You can see how easy it is to do that. There's a nice cutaway. There's a nice cutout here where you can put your thumb, and the knife just has a great feel in your hands. The aluminum does give it a little extra heft, but you're not going to break this. Deep pocket carry clip, 20 CV steel, and a really nice size blade. So that's the Kershaw Link. And just for the sake of conversation, I want to point out, I have the original Kershaw Link. This is also a US made knife. Excuse me. It's also a US made knife. As you can see, 770 black wash. Very similar design. It uses nylon, fiberglass infused nylon handles. I like the grip of these handles a little better. Otherwise, the ergonomics of the knife are exactly the same. However, this basic version of the knife, which is no longer available, except that you can still find them on eBay in brand new condition or sometimes still in the box. But this knife right here only uses a 420 HC stainless blade, and that basically is not a bad thing, because this version costs a lot less, but this knife's had to be sharpened a lot. So it doesn't have anywhere near, obviously, the edge retention that Sandvik or 20 CV or some of the other newer steels have. But it was still a great knife to carry. You can see by the pocket clip wear, this knife was in my pocket a lot. I cut stuff with it. I've pried with it a little bit, and I've put a lot of torque on this knife. It's rock solid. The lockup on it is perfect. So again, this is the early original Kershaw. It came in silver and a black wash blade. It's basically the same knife as the new Kershaw, but this comes with a much better blade steel than the original. So let's move on, and we're going to talk about the first of two ZT knives that are in my review. So Zero Tolerance right now is probably my favorite knife manufacturer out there. They are owned by the parent company that owns Kershaw, so Kai USA. This is the ZT0357. You might say, it looks a lot like that Link that you just showed us. Well, that's why I'm going to be doing a head-to-head video coming up probably in the next week on the 357 versus the Link. Well, folks, I got to tell you, this knife, everything about this knife is just about perfect. The G10 scaling is awesome. It feels great in your hand. If you are a fan of lanyard loops, it has a large place to put a lanyard loop, really beefy frame, deep pocket carry clip, jimping in your most popular knife grip. It has this beautiful little cutout here for extra finger positions when you're working. It just feels really good in your hand. And obviously you can see there's plenty of handle here. The scales stick out a good half to maybe 5/8 of an inch past the end of my fingers. So you can get a good purchase on this knife. It is very comfortable because it doesn't have any real scalloping. It's really comfortable if you use it in a reverse position for say chest lever. It's hard to find any fault in this knife. It's a really, really quality knife. And you can see it's American made and it uses 20 CV crucible super steel. So I've used this knife a lot. I've carried this knife a lot. I've cut a lot of things with it. It's still razor sharp. It'll still shave the hair off your arms like nobody's business. They come pretty scary sharp from the factory. I have not had any issues with edge retention on this knife at all. Just for the purpose of the video, I do own this knife in its other version, which is in the blacked out version. They call it the black wash. You can see that here. It's a 20 CV 0357 black wash. Same knife, same everything, just blacked out frame and the black washed, ceramic black washed blade. Beautiful knives, deploy awesome, fit and finish is great on all of these. Final knife in the review today is going to be the ZT0770CF. I have to say that I have not owned this knife very long, so I've not had a chance to really deploy it or use it very much. But this uses a Wharncliffe blade instead of a standard drop point. It's a flat grind, but they did something a little different here. The carbon fiber being strong like steel, they use this as both the scales and the frame. The liner lock is actually screwed into the carbon fiber. And you can just see that this is a really quality knife. Everything about the knife is just about perfection. From the ergonomics, where you can hold it. Like I said, I haven't had a chance to do a lot of cutting and slicing with it because I haven't owned it that long. It uses S35VN, another crucible steel, one of their super steels. But again, ergonomically, the knife is great. It uses a Wharncliffe drop point blade. Some people like that. You don't poke through things as often when you're cutting with them. They call this a sheep's foot blade as well. Some people might know it as a sheep's foot blade. But again, it's amazing. It's a really light knife, and that was the objective apparently, and yet it's very balanced. It doesn't feel really blade heavy, unlike, say, the SOG. It doesn't feel like, it's tipping in your hand. It feels very balanced for a knife that doesn't have really any metal back here other than the pocket clip. So definitely they achieved, I think, what they were trying to do with the 770 CF. So let's talk cost real quick on these knives. The Spyderco Tenacious is going to run about $50. The CRKT Shenanigan is still available. It comes in a couple different scale types, and this is $50 to $65 depending on how you have it outfitted. The Sog Aegis Tanto is still available in a very close facsimile to what this knife is for $60. The Kershaw Knockout is $70. The Link 20CV is $80. The original Link can still be found on eBay, new or like new, for around 40 to 50 bucks. The ZT-0357s are $160. And the ZT-0770CF is $195. You might see it for around $200, but $190 to $195 seems to be about the going price for this knife at the moment. So summing up, if I were going to go mid-range, I would probably avoid the SOG and the CRKT. If my budget was really on the smaller side, I'd be somewhere around the Spyderco. There's some other knives I like that are in the $40 to $50 range that I could recommend as well. But if I'm going mid-range, two knives that are still readily available, I would either choose the Kershaw Knockout with the Sandvik blade or the Kershaw Link. This is the newest current version of the Link in C20V. The new Knockout actually has the olive green like you see on the Link, and it has a black blade, but otherwise it's exactly the same knife that you see me holding in my hand now. And again, this is the current iteration of the Link. Why? Because both of these knives at this price point have great steels. Probably give the edge to the Link for having the 20CV blade. And then if we're talking at the top end of the chart, for this review, we've got the 0357 at 160, and we've got the 770 CF at just a little under 200 bucks. I would give the edge to the 357. Right now, this is my current favorite everyday carry full-size knife. It has everything you want, nothing you don't. It's not a fancy, frilly-looking knife, but with the 20 CV steel, it pretty much does everything you're going to need it to do. You've got durability, you've got toughness, edge retention, all of that stuff, corrosion resistance, and the fit and finish on the ZTs is just spectacular. So that pretty much wraps up my review for the day. I would like to let you know that I have a head-to-head coming up with the Link versus the 357. I'll probably post that in about a week. I also am going to do a review on the Natrix, which is a clone sort of the 770, but much more cost effective than the 770 is. And I have a couple of other ideas for more knife videos coming up. So if you liked watching today, please subscribe. Thanks for watching and stay sharp.